President Obama began his 2012 Democratic National Convention address by framing the election as far more than a simple contest between two individuals. He emphasized that it was a pivotal moment in the nation's history, one that would determine the direction of America for years to come. He presented the election as a choice between two fundamentally different visions for the country, contrasting his approach to leadership and governance with that of his opponent. Obama was careful to articulate that these differences were not merely superficial or political in nature, but philosophical, reflecting deep-seated beliefs about how society should function and what values should guide the nation. He argued that one vision sought to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a few, while the other, his vision, focused on shared responsibility, equal opportunity, and the empowerment of ordinary Americans. This framing was essential because it elevated the stakes of the election, urging citizens to consider not just immediate policy preferences, but the long-term trajectory of the nation's character and priorities. To reinforce this point, Obama often used the language of fairness, opportunity, and mutual obligation. He highlighted the idea that America's strength was historically rooted in a broad, thriving middle class, which served as the backbone of the economy and the engine of social stability. By juxtaposing this vision with one that he claimed would undermine the middle class in favor of tax cuts for the wealthy, deregulation, and reduced social support, he made the choice between the two visions stark and tangible for his audience. He painted a picture of an America where one vision led to inclusive growth, innovation, and shared prosperity, while the other threatened to perpetuate inequality, limit upward mobility, and prioritize the interests of the affluent over the needs of the many. This approach allowed him to connect abstract political principles to concrete consequences for everyday Americans, making the stakes personal as well as national. Obama's rhetoric also emphasized the moral dimension of the choice. By framing the election as a decision between fairness and favoritism, responsibility and neglect, he appealed not just to voters' rational calculations, but also to their ethical sensibilities. He reminded the audience that the policies enacted by the government reflect the values of the society itself, and that electing leaders is ultimately a moral act, as it shapes how resources, opportunities, and burdens are distributed. By making this moral argument, he reinforced the idea that civic participation carries weight beyond immediate policy outcomes, and that the collective decision of the electorate defines the nation's character. In doing so, Obama reinforced his image as a leader who was not only pragmatic and results-oriented, but also deeply concerned with principles of justice, equity, and communal well-being. In articulating the differences between the two visions, Obama provided examples drawn from economic policy, healthcare, education, and taxation. He contrasted his administration's efforts to expand healthcare access, invest in education, and create economic opportunities with policies he claimed would disproportionately benefit the wealthy and powerful while leaving working families behind. These comparisons were designed to be tangible and relatable, allowing ordinary citizens to understand the implications of each vision in their daily lives. For example, he highlighted the importance of affordable health care not merely as a political issue, but as a moral imperative that affects families' security and well-being. Similarly, his emphasis on education reform underscored the idea that investing in the next generation is a choice about the nation's future trajectory, illustrating how vision and values translate into concrete actions. Moreover, Obama's framing of the election as a choice between two visions allowed him to unify his audience around a sense of shared purpose. He reinforced that the electorate was not merely choosing between policies, but between paths that would define the nation's identity. By doing so, he encouraged a sense of civic responsibility, reminding voters that their engagement mattered and that participating in the democratic process was essential for sustaining the values they believed in. This sense of collective agency was a recurring theme in his rhetoric, and it helped cultivate enthusiasm and hope among his supporters, motivating them to see themselves as active participants in shaping the nation's destiny rather than passive observers. Importantly, Obama's message was forward-looking. While he acknowledged challenges and setbacks, he framed them as opportunities to choose progress over stagnation and collaboration over division. By presenting the election as a choice between visions, he emphasized that the country could not remain static and that the decisions made in 2012 would have lasting implications for social cohesion, economic opportunity, and international standing. He implicitly argued that leadership was not merely about responding to crises, but about setting a vision that could inspire collective effort, mobilize resources, and guide the nation toward a more equitable and prosperous future. This forward-thinking perspective resonated with audiences who were seeking hope and a sense of direction amidst economic uncertainty and political polarization. Finally, Obama's emphasis on the contrast between two visions also reinforced his broader political philosophy, that democracy works best when it reflects the values and aspirations of the majority, that government should act as a tool to empower citizens rather than enrich the privileged, and that progress requires shared sacrifice and collective action. By framing the 2012 election in these terms, he was able to convey not only the practical consequences of policy choices, but also the philosophical stakes of leadership. His message was clear. Voters were being asked to decide not just who should govern, but what kind of country they wanted to live in, what principles should guide their government, and what legacy they hoped to leave for future generations. This emphasis on vision, values, and moral responsibility formed the backbone of his address and set the stage for the remainder of his speech, which detailed concrete policies and achievements that embodied his preferred path for the nation. President Obama, in his 2012 Democratic National Convention speech, placed tremendous emphasis on the middle class as the foundation of the American economy, framing it as a moral and practical imperative for national stability and prosperity. From the outset, he articulated the idea that a strong middle class is not just a demographic reality, but the backbone of opportunity, innovation, and sustainable growth in the country. He argued that when working families thrive, they drive consumption, support businesses, and contribute to the broader social fabric, creating a virtuous cycle that benefits everyone. This emphasis was not purely economic. It was deeply rooted in his vision of fairness, shared responsibility, and the notion that the success of the nation depends on the empowerment of ordinary citizens rather than the concentration of wealth at the top. Obama highlighted the challenges that middle-class families faced at the time, including job insecurity, stagnating wages, rising healthcare costs, and the burden of student loans. He painted a vivid picture of families working tirelessly, sometimes holding multiple jobs, and yet struggling to make ends meet or secure a future for their children. By doing so, he humanized the economic issues, making them relatable to the audience and grounding his broader economic policies in the lived experiences of real people. He argued that the health of the economy cannot be measured merely by stock market indices or corporate profits, but by the ability of families to live with dignity, plan for their children's education, and achieve upward mobility. Central to Obama's argument was the idea that government has a critical role in strengthening the middle class through policies that expand opportunity, support working families, and level the playing field. He pointed to initiatives such as the Affordable Care Act, which aimed to make health care more accessible and affordable, reducing the financial stress on middle-income households. He also emphasized education reform, from investing in early childhood programs to improving schools and expanding access to higher education. These initiatives, he argued, were investments not only in individual lives but in the nation's long-term economic competitiveness, ensuring that the workforce would be equipped with the skills needed in a rapidly changing global economy. Obama also contrasted his approach with policies that, in his view, favored the wealthy and undermined the middle class. He criticized tax cuts and deregulation measures that primarily benefited the top earners while leaving working families behind, framing them as short-term solutions that ultimately erode the social and economic foundations of the country. By juxtaposing these approaches, he reinforced the moral and practical stakes of policy choices, arguing that a society that neglects its middle class risks economic stagnation, social division, and a loss of opportunity for future generations. He underscored the notion that fairness and growth are interconnected. When the middle class is strong, the entire economy benefits, creating a more stable, resilient, and dynamic society. A key component of his message was job creation and economic opportunity. Obama emphasized the importance of policies that support industries with growth potential, such as clean energy, technology, and manufacturing, while also investing in infrastructure projects that provide immediate employment opportunities. He argued that job creation should focus not only on the quantity of jobs but also on the quality, ensuring that workers receive fair wages, benefits, and protections. By doing so, he framed economic policy as a tool to restore dignity, reward hard work, and reinforce the social contract that underpins the nation's democratic and economic systems. Obama also highlighted the importance of innovation and entrepreneurship as pathways for middle-class growth. He celebrated American ingenuity, stressing that providing access to education, capital, and technology empowers individuals to start businesses, create jobs, and contribute to the economy. In his vision, a thriving middle class is both a consumer base and a driver of innovation, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that benefits the nation as a whole. By connecting policy, education, and opportunity to the practical outcomes of economic stability, he painted a comprehensive picture of how a strong middle class supports national prosperity and resilience. Moreover, he appealed to the sense of fairness and shared responsibility that underpins the American ideal. Obama argued that the middle class deserves support not as a handout, but as recognition of its central role in sustaining the economy and society. He framed the discussion around reciprocity. A government that invests in its citizens, provides opportunities, and protects against unfair economic pressures is a government that strengthens the nation. Conversely, policies that prioritize the few at the expense of the many threaten not only economic stability, but also the social cohesion and moral fabric of the country. Throughout his speech, Obama also made an emotional appeal, acknowledging the struggles of families while expressing confidence in their resilience. He invoked stories of everyday Americans, teachers, nurses, small business owners, and factory workers, to illustrate how policies that strengthen the middle class have tangible, transformative impacts on real lives. By doing so, he connected abstract economic concepts to personal experience, making the importance of middle-class empowerment concrete and relatable. This approach also reinforced his overarching message that governance is not about ideology alone, but about improving the quality of life for citizens and ensuring equitable opportunities for success. Finally, Obama's emphasis on the middle class was strategic, highlighting it as both a moral and economic imperative that transcends political divisions. He framed strengthening the middle class as an investment in the nation's future, a foundation for social stability, economic innovation, and democratic health. By presenting his policies as targeted efforts to uplift working families, he positioned his administration as committed to fairness, opportunity, and the long-term well-being of the American people. In this vision, a strong middle class is not merely a social goal, but the engine of economic growth, the guarantor of opportunity, and the heart of a just and thriving society. In his 2012 Democratic National Convention speech, President Obama placed significant emphasis on the importance of investing in the future through innovation, clean energy, and education reform, framing these elements as essential to the long-term strength and competitiveness of the United States. He argued that the country's ability to maintain economic leadership and social progress depended on its commitment to forward-looking policies that equip Americans with the tools and skills they need to thrive in a rapidly changing world. At the heart of this vision was a recognition that the challenges of the 21st century, climate change, globalization, technological disruption, and an increasingly competitive international economy, required proactive strategies, bold investment, and a focus on innovation as both a moral imperative and a practical necessity. Obama highlighted the clean energy sector as a central pillar of this future-oriented strategy. He pointed out that investing in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and emerging technologies was not only environmentally responsible, but also economically strategic. By supporting solar, wind, and other renewable energy industries, the administration sought to create new high-quality jobs, stimulate local economies, and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Obama argued that a commitment to clean energy would ensure that the United States remained competitive in a global market increasingly defined by technological innovation and sustainability. He framed this as a choice between embracing the opportunities of the future or remaining tied to outdated energy models that could leave the country economically and environmentally vulnerable. Equally central to Obama's vision was the role of education in fostering innovation and opportunity. He emphasized that preparing the next generation for success required investments across the entire educational spectrum, from early childhood programs to higher education and vocational training. He argued that quality education equips young Americans not only with knowledge, but also with the critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving skills necessary to drive innovation. Obama highlighted initiatives aimed at improving teacher quality, modernizing curricula, and providing equitable resources to schools, stressing that the success of the nation depended on ensuring that every child had access to a high-quality education regardless of their background. By linking education to economic competitiveness, he presented it as both a moral obligation and a strategic imperative, framing opportunity as a product of both individual effort and collective investment. Obama also emphasized the connection between innovation, entrepreneurship, and economic growth. He argued that fostering a culture of innovation requires support for research, science, and technology, as well as policies that enable entrepreneurs to start businesses, scale solutions, and create jobs. This included investments in advanced manufacturing, scientific research, and technology development, which he framed as critical to maintaining American leadership in an increasingly interconnected and competitive global economy. By highlighting the role of innovation in driving economic growth, he conveyed the idea that the nation's future prosperity was dependent not only on natural resources or short-term policies, but on the ability to harness human creativity, ingenuity, and knowledge. Moreover, Obama's discussion of education and innovation was tied to broader themes of equality and opportunity. He stressed that access to quality education and emerging industries should not be limited by socioeconomic background, race, or geography. By ensuring that all Americans could participate in and benefit from the country's growth sectors, he argued that the nation could foster both economic prosperity and social cohesion. In his framing, Innovation was not merely a technological or economic challenge, but a moral one, requiring investment in people and communities to ensure that the benefits of progress were widely shared. This approach reinforced the idea that public policy should serve as a bridge between talent and opportunity, enabling the nation to thrive collectively rather than concentrating advantages in the hands of a few. Obama also connected his emphasis on clean energy, education, and innovation to job creation. He argued that investing in these areas could generate meaningful employment in emerging industries while simultaneously addressing long-term societal challenges. For example, clean energy projects create a wide range of jobs, from research and development to construction and manufacturing. Similarly, investments in education equip young people to pursue careers in technology, science, healthcare, and other high-demand fields. By framing these investments as both socially responsible and economically productive, Obama linked moral imperatives with practical outcomes, showing that a commitment to the future could generate immediate and long-term benefits for families and communities. Another critical element of Obama's vision was the idea that progress requires forward-looking leadership and a willingness to embrace change. He argued that innovation and reform often involve risk and experimentation, but that the costs of inaction could be far greater. Whether in energy policy, education reform, or scientific research, he emphasized the importance of investing boldly and strategically, rather than clinging to outdated models that might slow the nation's growth. In doing so, he positioned his administration as proactive and visionary, committed to preparing the United States for future challenges while ensuring that the benefits of progress are equitably distributed. Throughout his speech, Obama also highlighted examples of American ingenuity and resilience to illustrate the power of innovation. He spoke about entrepreneurs, engineers, teachers, and students who were shaping the future through creativity and dedication. By connecting these real-world examples to policy initiatives, he demonstrated that investing in clean energy, education, and innovation was not abstract or theoretical, but had tangible impacts on communities, individuals, and the nation as a whole. This approach made the vision relatable and actionable, reinforcing the idea that citizens, when supported by effective policies, can drive progress and build a stronger, more competitive country. Finally, Obama framed these priorities as central to the nation's identity and long-term viability. He suggested that embracing clean energy, investing in education, and fostering innovation were not merely strategic or economic choices, but expressions of American values, ingenuity, responsibility, and a commitment to future generations. By linking policy to principle, he underscored that the nation's strength comes from the ability to adapt, innovate, and uplift its people, ensuring that the United States remains a leader in the world and a place of opportunity for all. In his 2012 Democratic National Convention speech, President Obama devoted significant attention to issues of national security, global leadership, and the responsible winding down of military engagements abroad. He emphasized that the United States must maintain its strength and credibility in the world while simultaneously recognizing the limitations and responsibilities of power. Central to his argument was the idea that leadership in the 21st century requires a balance between protecting national interests, honoring commitments to allies, and pursuing diplomacy and international cooperation where possible, rather than relying solely on military intervention. By framing national security in this broader context, Obama sought to reassure the American people that his administration had acted decisively and prudently to defend the nation while avoiding unnecessary conflicts that could drain resources, risk lives, and destabilize regions. One of the core points Obama emphasized was the end of major combat operations in Iraq and the ongoing transition in Afghanistan. He reminded his audience that when he took office, American troops were engaged in long and costly wars, with thousands of lives lost and significant financial burdens placed on the nation. Through careful planning, strategic diplomacy, and coordination with military leaders, his administration had overseen the withdrawal of combat troops from Iraq, fulfilling a campaign promise and demonstrating a commitment to ending protracted military engagements responsibly. Similarly, in Afghanistan, he highlighted efforts to transfer security responsibilities to Afghan forces while gradually reducing American military presence, stressing that this approach reflected a strategic balance between ensuring stability and avoiding endless occupation. By presenting these actions as deliberate, measured, and rooted in both principle and strategy, Obama sought to convey his understanding of the complexities of modern warfare and the importance of thoughtful leadership in national security matters. Another pivotal moment in his speech involved his discussion of the operation that led to the death of Osama bin Laden. Obama presented this as a concrete example of decisive action taken in the service of national security and justice. He emphasized that this achievement reflected the effectiveness of intelligence, military coordination, and leadership under pressure, underscoring the administration's ability to act when necessary to protect the nation. At the same time, he framed it within a broader strategy that prioritized smart, focused actions over broad, open-ended military campaigns. By highlighting this success, he reinforced the credibility of his leadership while illustrating his belief that the use of force should be targeted, strategic, and informed by careful analysis rather than impulsive or symbolic gestures. Obama also addressed the need for global leadership beyond the battlefield. He stressed that America's influence in the world depends not only on military might but also on diplomacy, alliances, and international cooperation. He highlighted partnerships with other nations in addressing challenges such as economic instability, climate change, nuclear proliferation, and regional conflicts. By situating military actions within a broader context of global engagement, Obama argued that true leadership requires a combination of strength, prudence, and moral authority. He suggested that America's role in the world is most effective when it leads not through coercion alone, but through example, collaboration, and adherence to international norms and principles. This approach, he argued, not only protects national security, but also enhances the nation's credibility, influence, and capacity to shape global outcomes in ways that align with American values and interests. In addition, Obama underscored the moral dimension of national security policy. He reminded the audience that the human cost of war is immense, affecting not only soldiers but also their families and the populations of countries where conflicts occur. By emphasizing careful planning, adherence to international law, and a commitment to minimizing civilian casualties, he framed responsible leadership as an ethical obligation. This moral framing reinforced his broader message that the exercise of power must be guided by principle, not expedience or political gain. It also reinforced his credibility as a leader who weighs consequences, acts responsibly, and considers the long-term implications of decisions that affect millions of lives. Economic considerations were also intertwined with his discussion of security. Obama argued that ending prolonged wars responsibly frees up resources to invest domestically in education, infrastructure, healthcare, and job creation, linking national security decisions to the broader health of the nation. He positioned this as a pragmatic approach, demonstrating that careful planning in military affairs can have positive ripple effects on domestic stability and prosperity. By connecting global leadership to domestic well-being, Obama illustrated that responsible foreign policy and strong national security are integral to the nation's overall strategy for success, rather than isolated or purely defensive endeavors. Obama's rhetoric also reinforced the idea of continuity and preparedness. He emphasized that while wars were ending or transitioning, the nation must remain vigilant, maintain a modern, well-equipped military, and invest in intelligence capabilities. Preparedness, he argued, is a critical component of national security, ensuring that the country can respond to emerging threats and protect its citizens without resorting to unnecessary conflict. This balanced message reassured the public that reducing military presence abroad did not equate to weakness, but represented thoughtful, strategic leadership designed to preserve both security and resources. Finally, throughout his discussion of national security, Obama highlighted the importance of public trust and accountability. He underscored that decisions about war and peace are some of the gravest responsibilities of leadership, and that citizens have a stake in ensuring that these powers are exercised judiciously. By emphasizing transparency, accountability, and adherence to both domestic law and international standards, he framed responsible leadership as both a strategic and ethical imperative. This approach reinforced the theme that the United States can project strength and leadership globally while remaining true to its values, ensuring that the exercise of power strengthens both national security and the moral legitimacy of the country. In his 2012 Democratic National Convention speech, President Obama concluded with a profound emphasis on the importance of citizenship, unity, and collective responsibility, portraying these ideals as essential not only for the functioning of democracy, but for the moral and social fabric of nation. He framed the election and, more broadly, the nation's trajectory as a choice that depended not only on leaders but on the active participation of citizens, their willingness to engage in civic life, and their commitment to one another. Obama consistently highlighted the idea that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires engagement, accountability, and a shared sense of purpose. By emphasizing collective responsibility, he reminded Americans that individual actions, voting, community involvement, and advocacy accumulate to shape the nation's future and reinforce its core values. Obama underscored that unity is not merely a slogan, but a necessity for addressing the challenges facing the nation. He acknowledged the political, economic, and social divisions that existed at the time, but insisted that these differences could be bridged through dialogue, cooperation, and a recognition of shared goals. He argued that when citizens come together across political, racial, and economic lines, they generate the strength, resilience, and creativity needed to solve complex problems. Unity, in his framing, was not uniformity or the absence of disagreement, but a commitment to collaboration, mutual respect, and the understanding that individual and collective well-being are deeply intertwined. By presenting unity as both a moral and practical imperative, Obama reinforced the idea that the success of the nation depends on citizens recognizing their interconnectedness and prioritizing common good over narrow self-interest. A key aspect of Obama's message was the role of ordinary citizens in effecting change. He repeatedly emphasized that progress is rarely imposed from the top down. It is built through the actions of people who are willing to work, organize, advocate, and persist despite obstacles. He cited examples of community leaders, volunteers, educators, and everyday Americans who embody the spirit of citizenship by contributing to their neighborhoods, mentoring youth, or volunteering in civic initiatives. These examples serve to illustrate that meaningful change is grounded in participation, and that the power of democracy rests in the hands of the people. By highlighting the agency of ordinary citizens, Obama both inspired his audience and reminded them of their responsibility to engage in collective problem-solving and civic stewardship. Obama also connected citizenship and collective responsibility to the broader principles of fairness and opportunity. He argued that the strength of a democracy is measured not only by its institutions, but by the degree to which citizens are empowered to participate, influence decision-making, and ensure that policies reflect shared values. By framing civic engagement as both a right and a duty, he reinforced the idea that active participation is essential for safeguarding justice, equality, and opportunity. He suggested that when citizens take responsibility for one another, whether through civic action, voting, or community support, they create a more resilient, equitable society. This emphasis on reciprocal responsibility framed the exercise of citizenship not as a passive privilege, but as an ethical and practical necessity for sustaining the nation's ideals. In addition, Obama stressed the importance of hope, perseverance, and optimism in fostering unity and collective action. He acknowledged the difficulties and setbacks that citizens face, whether economic, social, or personal, but argued that these challenges are surmountable when people work together. Hope in this context was not passive but active, a recognition that the combined efforts of engaged citizens can overcome obstacles, generate innovation, and advance justice. By pairing hope with responsibility, Obama reinforced the notion that the future is not predetermined. It is shaped by the decisions, actions, and commitment of the populace. This combination of aspiration and accountability was central to his vision of citizenship as an empowering force for both individuals and communities. Obama also highlighted the symbolic and practical significance of collective responsibility in moments of national crisis. He argued that Americans have historically demonstrated resilience, courage, and solidarity in the face of adversity, from economic recessions to natural disasters to social upheavals. These examples illustrated that progress is often achieved when individuals set aside self-interest to contribute to the common good. By invoking this historical perspective, he reinforced the idea that citizenship carries with it both rights and obligations, and that the health of the nation depends on citizens recognizing their role in sustaining democratic institutions, social cohesion, and economic stability. Responsibility, in this sense, is both an ethical principle and a practical necessity for ensuring national strength and unity. Moreover, Obama emphasized the role of civic engagement in bridging generational divides and ensuring the sustainability of democratic principles. He encouraged Americans to mentor younger generations, participate in community initiatives, and model active citizenship. By framing engagement as intergenerational, he underscored that unity and responsibility are not temporary or episodic commitments, but enduring obligations that must be passed on. This perspective linked individual action to long-term national stability, suggesting that the health of democracy is directly tied to the cultivation of a culture of active, informed, and responsible citizenship. Finally, Obama's call for unity and collective responsibility served as both a vision and a challenge. He reminded citizens that building a stronger, fairer, and more prosperous nation is not solely the task of leaders, but a shared responsibility that requires participation, collaboration, and moral commitment. He portrayed democracy as a living, dynamic process shaped by engaged individuals who recognize their interdependence and act in the interest of the broader community. By concluding his speech with this message, he reinforced the overarching theme that citizenship, unity, and collective responsibility are not abstract ideals, but practical necessities for securing the nation's future, advancing justice, and ensuring that progress is both inclusive and sustainable. This emphasis on civic duty, shared purpose, and moral engagement encapsulated his vision of America as a nation that thrives when its people act together with integrity, commitment, and hope.